Uh, I'm Mary Grace, and we've got Dr. Shawn Baker here, and this is episode 14 of Healing America and Beyond. Dr. Baker and I do this collaboration about once or twice a month, and we're very happy to be bringing you this show today. We normally stream on Fridays. We just had something come up, so we're bringing you the show today. We don't want to miss. It's World Carnivore Month. Dr. Baker has a new puppy, so we have to get, first things first. And so while Dr. Baker is retweeting and reposting, we will invite everyone in. As you're coming in, please say hello. It looks like we are getting some traffic here. And if you're not getting the emails, if you're wondering why am I not getting notifications, please go to my website, to marygracemedia.com, and you can get on the mailing list over there, and then you will get emails before the show goes live. And that's probably the easiest way to keep track of everything, marygracemedia.com. And also any links we mentioned during the show today, any sponsors or anything like that, you'll be able to find those on the website as well. So, Dr. Baker, we ready?
We are ready. And when I say we, I say yeah,
I know.
yeah, we are ready.
This is okay. You can't come on. You have to hold Daisy up.
There's Daisy.
Look at Daisy.
Yeah.
This is so she's going to be the main attraction for the entire show. Look at her. How old is she?
She is about 10 weeks old. So she's a little cream-colored miniature dachshund dog it's actually my son's dog, he's at school. So
okay.
Dad gets to take care of
puppies.
So super cute, but she is a little bit of a menace, and I got to keep an eye on her so she doesn't eat things she's not supposed to eat. And,
they have big personalities. Little dogs with a big personality. So this show is going to go viral now that we've had a cute puppy on it. So just so you know, that's the way the algorithm works here. Hold her up right to the camera.
Let's get you there for clicks. There you go.
Yeah, we're going to go viral.
There she is. Here we go.
There you go.
Looking everywhere. I don't laugh as much as when
put
they
her right up to the camera.
There we go.
Give us
there
a
you go.
puppy
There's
face.
a better look. There's a better look.
There we go. Oh my goodness. And she keeps up with the big dogs?
She does. Yeah, I take them for walks every morning, and they go. She's up to a mile now. So her feet are going, about a mile a minute, keeping up the other dogs. But
look at that little face. Oh,
she's doing it. Yep.
Okay. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Daisy on the show. Is she carnivore? So
she is transitioning. We got her from, it's kind of interesting. We got it from a breeder actually in Loma Linda, California, which is sort of vegan central. And they didn't have her on a vegan diet or anything, but they had her on a puppy kibble. And so we're finishing in her bag and ramping up her meat consumption. And
she identifies as
she is carnivore. She's going to be carnivore probably within about 2 months. She'll be fully carnivore. So but I put some meat down for her, and man, she can put that down. Holy cow! It is like fastest ever, faster than my big dogs. She can just crank through.
Do you give them freeze dried, like treats and stuff?
Well, I give them, I don't give them a lot of treats, but I do give them a little, kind of freeze-dried chicken, basically. That's the treat. And then they eat ground beef as their main meal.
We get freeze-dried beef liver, and I'll tell you, my one cat is like insane over that. Like he goes crazy, almost like a drug addict. I mean, it's crazy, but they know what they like, and they eat mostly fish. So we have carnivores here. Okay. So, one thing I wanted to mention to listeners, because they may not be familiar with the show, is that you were featured a couple of weeks ago on American Thought Leaders with Jan Jekielek, and you went up to DC for that interview. And I encourage everybody to go watch that. It is, you can find it on YouTube. Just type in American Thought Leaders, Dr. Shawn Baker, and it will be right there. So I definitely recommend that. It's a great show, and they feature, pretty amazing people on the show. So I think it's a real honor that you were on. So congratulations on that. Really wonderful that you got to be up there, and you got to be in DC before the big freeze. It's messy up there right now.
Yeah, I had a whole East Coast sort of trip. I had DC, then I had another big podcast in Virginia, and then I went down to Florida. Naples, Florida, for a little conference. So I was just kind of a part of a kind of an East Coast thing. Fortunately, I was able to combine them all into one trip, so I didn't have to, because I'm always on the west side of the
Yeah.
country. So,
Yeah.
but
Well,
that was a good. I mean, it was a good podcast. I enjoyed meeting Jan and chatting
yeah.
with him, and he seems generally interested. And it's one of those things where a different audience, getting a different audience. And I think
Oh, for sure.
reading some of the messages from the YouTube channel that he had generally seemed positive. And I think
Mhm.
I generally try to present this in a
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
reasonable way. And I think that
Mhm.
more likely to interest people when they realize that it isn't just all this sort of culty, crazy stuff. There's a lot of just reasonableness about the way
Mhm.
we approach nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, and I think Jan is a very reasonable person, so he tends to ask, I think, good, serious questions. Not he's not like one of those gotcha journalists, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's good. Next time you're in Virginia, um, you can come down to my little podcast studio. We can do a live.
Yeah,
And,
maybe next time I'm there, that'd be good. We might, like I said, reasonable chance we're moving to the east side of the country in the
oh,
near
okay.
future. So that's
Okay.
maybe a more likely possibility now.
Okay. Well, you can sneak Daisy in as your emotional support puppy. Bring her down here.
Yeah, hopefully she
Uh,
won't need so much support in the near future. But yeah,
oh, I was talking about, how people have their emotional support dogs
yeah, it's kind of funny.
that they bring with them, yeah. So, okay, we're gonna take questions at the end of the show today, so please hold your questions as usual. Just proceed them when the time comes with a Q, 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 that way we know it's questions, but don't ask now because we will probably lose track of what you're asking. So Dr. Baker, I think um, so much has been happening. We talked about the new food guidelines
Hmm.
last time because those just came out from Health and Human Services, and I think one of the things that you brought up with in the interview with Jan was you guys were talking about food addiction, and I thought that would be something good to touch on because I think it's pretty clear that so much of the American diet and the American food industry, when I talk about food, I mean sort of food-like substances, but we know that a lot of them are modified in such a way to foster addiction. And I wondered if you would talk about that as it relates to the work that you do and what types of things you see in people and how people can change that with dietary changes, with, going on to real foods, whole foods, especially meat-based. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Is it real?
Well,
Is
yeah. I
food
mean, I
real?
think food addiction is recognized by many people, many organizations, many people have stood it, and they say it sort of mirrors alcoholism. About 14% of the population suffers with alcoholism, and food addiction is very similar in that in its prevalence. And what I would say, when you treat chronic disease of almost any type, whether it's autoimmune disease or diabetes or any, you can just whatever, depression, you're very often have to address this issue because food addiction contributes to it, and it's not the addiction itself, but it's the food that you're harming yourself with. So the food that you're putting in your body, and this food was, it was created, it was designed with that intent. I mean, when they are choosing ingredients, and they have taste testers, and they do this, and they have, people that say, does this make me want to eat more of it? And if the answer is yes, we're going to use that. And then they calculate in price and all the other things and variables to sell the product, because, these are all businesses, and their end goal is not to feed you, it is to make money. And then the side effect is feeding you. Right. And so we have this very, very addictive food, you know, uh, food system right now. And this, a guy named, I think it was Bernard Moskowitz in the late 70s, 80s, came up with the bliss point, that magic combination of salt and sweet and fat. And that's what, makes it irresistible. And then, they've added all these other chemicals in there for flavor enhancement and texture enhancement and shelf life and all these things that, likely cause harm to a lot of us, even though they're generally recognized as safe. They've never really been fully tested to the
Mhm.
extent that we know, do they cause autoimmune disease or do they
Yeah.
cause mental health disorders? We don't know that because we've never really tested those things. So Yeah, I mean, the first thing is just first thing is realizing that food does make a difference. This is something
Mhm.
I started with my kids very early. I said, "Hey guys, do you know that the foods you put in your that you consume can make you feel bad? They can make you feel sad. They can make your tummy hurt. They can,
Mhm.
you start at a very young age and you teach these kids that food does play a role here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not just about, slicking your appetite, because or eating what tastes the best because, a lot of, like I said, they engineer food to taste better. Um, and so many people struggle with that. And so realizing that, food has a role here and it affects disease. And the question is, well, how do you treat that if it is an addiction?
Mhm.
And
Can I stop you for just a second?
sure,
Because you
of
said
course, yeah.
something really important, and that is that they engineer food to, make you feel a certain way and to foster that addiction, and I think a lot of people are just catching on to that. That's something that Callie Means talks about as a former food lobbyist, that, um, big, tobacco, when they lost the ability to market as much as they did, they switched over to food. And so they started putting those addictive substances in the food to achieve some of the same ends that they did with tobacco, and so that's something that people may not be dialed in on yet, but that's really
Mhm.
key, especially when you're buying things that have been ultra processed, because then they have those, modified, very specifically targeted ingredients that are doing this. So now that when you understand that, the solution makes a lot more sense too.
Yeah, for some people, and I see their comments, sugar poppy guy saying this, carnivore is a temporary protocol and you can't do it long term. We don't know the answer to that. I mean, the reality is no one knows. I don't know. Anyone knows. Anyone who says that you can't do it long term or long term is going to be bad at consequences is basically lying because there's no data. And the same if people say, yeah, it's perfectly fine long term. No one knows. That's the real answer to that. And so, what I tell people is stay healthy and do what keeps you healthy as long as possible. And if
Yeah.
eating a carnivore diet and your health, like I'm 10 years into this, I'm still kicking butt at almost 60 years of age. I just talked to a 90-year-old guy. It's kind of an interesting story. I'll share this. Dentist. He'd been an athlete early on in his life. In fact, he rode for UCLA as a rower in the 1950s. And he competed with a guy named Rafer Johnson. If some of you guys may be old enough to remember who he is, he was a famous decathlete from the 1950s and 60s, won the Olympic gold medal for the U.S. And anyway, but he, was a dentist, and over his career, he did the food pyramid and thought he was healthy. And then, towards the end of his life, he got really sick. He could barely walk at 88, was unable to walk anymore, more than a few steps without severe
Mhm.
pain. He went on a carnivore diet. He now has 5 world records on the concept to rower. He went from not being able to walk, going carnivore at almost 90 years of age. He's now 90,
Like
and he's got
strict carnivore?
strict carnivore. He's got five world records, which is interesting because I've got world records on the rower, and it's just kind of
Yeah.
funny. And the guy who has a 60 plus world record that I'm going to break is a carnivore. The guy who had the 40 plus world record is a carnivore. So I mean, this is something that I think is just interesting to see somebody that old
Mhm.
reversing their life with something like this. So it's really cool to see. And that's a 90-year-old. So I mean, it's who's to say how old you can be or can't be. And I know people say, well, if he did it for 20 years, he would get sick. Well, he'd be 110 at that point. So I mean, who cares at that point? Um, but to your point about, like, what do you do when you realize that food and food addiction are leading to your chronic disease? And you can try to say, well, I think it is grains and I think it's sugar, so I'm going to cut those things out. I'm going to do this no sugar, no grain thing that like guys like Vinny Tortorich promote. And for some people that works. For some people it doesn't. For some people, I mean, complete abstinence. It's kind of like the analogy for alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic, no one is saying, just cut out the hard liquor, but have a little wine on the weekends. That's cool, right?
Mhm.
That probably doesn't work for a lot of people. For
Yeah.
some people, it's an all or nothing thing. And I think a lot of people are like that. And I think a lot of us realize that uh, even a whole food, unprocessed carbohydrate like fruit or something like that, for some people, it just does something that is not good to them. I recently, 9 years into this, and I'm in my 10th year now, but at the end of this year, I did an experiment just because people were saying, oh, you can't reintroduce carbohydrates and you'll get really sick. And I said, no, I don't think that's true. And so I did. I did it
Mhm.
for a month and I didn't get really sick. I
Mhm.
gained some weight. I gained about 10 pounds of body weight. And
Like
I had a
fruit
little bit of, yeah, it
fruits?
was fruit and honey and a little bit of yogurt and stuff
Mhm.
like that. ate about 150, 200 grams of carbs a day. I gained about 10 pounds. Some of it was body fat. I did not get better athletically, which is a really interesting part to me because
Mhm.
I don't really care about what diet I'm on. I want to perform my best as an athlete and feel my best as a human being. So whatever gets me there is what gets me there. Adding carbs did not do that for me. And I know that
Mm.
people say, well, you didn't, it's not long enough, or you didn't do this. They've all got their sort of
Mm.
only my way works. And, it's like, and like I said,
Yeah.
I had eaten carbs for 49 of my years of my life, and I was developing illness. And as soon as I add them back in, those sort of things start to come back. Now it was subtle, a little bit of gut,
Mm.
a little bit of gut bloating, a little bit of inflammation, a little bit of sore shoulder. At nearly 60, I would say, well, that's pretty normal. That's what most people feel. And I would not have ever even noticed that. I would never thought a second about it. I was thinking, well, that's just
Mhm.
normal life. And I could have lived that way. I could live that way the rest of my life. But knowing what I know, what I feel like on Carnivore, where I don't have any of that, I'm like, why would I choose that? And
Mm.
there are people, and it's a lot of these people that are younger. I see these people that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and I eat carbs and I work out and I'm fine, and that type of stuff. And I'm like, well, I did that until I was 42, and then I started getting sick, and then I had to start
Mhm.
dialing things back in. And I think there's an age sort of thing where the net benefit of carbohydrates, maybe you get some performance benefit,
Mhm.
start to be overridden by maybe some of the inflammatory aspects that occur to some people, and not all people get that. But I am, and I'm certainly, I never tell people never eat carbs, don't try to reintroduce things. I encourage people, hey, get healthy. Maybe I'm giving a lecture to physicians on tomorrow, in fact, for grand rounds. And one of the things I say is, 3, 6 months intervention, you might take a year to resolve, and then try to reintroduce. Some people
Mhm.
do, some people
Mhm.
don't. Some people don't want to reintroduce. Some
Yeah.
people do successfully, some people don't. So it's just one of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah, we definitely have talked about carnivore as an elimination diet,
Mm.
at the very least, for people who are dealing with things that they haven't been able to resolve, uh, especially anything to do with metabolic health, blood sugar, especially people dealing with type 2 diabetes, and typically, if you're at that point, you have other comorbidities, right? It's not usually just that, it's usually excess weight, it's then you're getting into the high blood pressure category, then you're getting into kidney problems. I mean, it's just a cascading effect, um, and the type 2 diabetes is kind of, I guess, the beacon that gets recognized by the doctor or by you, and then you can measure it, right? So, but hopefully people not everybody will get to that point before they have to address it, and, for me, I think that I was kind of borderline, like, metabolic syndrome, and that's not typical, I think, or maybe it is typical, but I'm not a big person, you've met me. So, I'm not really the classic, you know, obese, borderline obese, anything like that. But even with me, that was something that really gave me pause, and that's one of the reasons that I decided, "Okay, I need to make a big switch here." That and also getting joint pain, um, and having an autoimmune condition, so it was something that it just made sense at least to try it, and I saw so many improvements that it just made sense, you know? And, ironically, I've been sick this past week, and I haven't been able to eat that much, but one of the things that's been helping me as I ease back into it is beef broth. So, that's a nice little thing to have when you haven't been able to eat much or, just talk or things like that. So, it's a good therapeutic thing. It's like the old people would always make broth, and, here we are again. What do we need? Bone broth. That's therapeutic, and it's still works today, right? So that's a good thing. I wanna ask you, though, about fat, because I think there's different schools of thought when it comes to, high-fat carnivore. There are people who do what's called protein sparing, um, and so there is some I don't know if controversy is the word, but disagreement sometimes about what is optimal for people who are on a carnivore diet.
Well, yeah, there's nuance, and I think the answer to that is some different strategies work better for different people. I mean, I think that there are. I mean, first of all, if you are on a carnivore diet, then fat is obviously essential. You have to have energy. If you're not consuming carbohydrates, then you need the fat to help with that. I mean, you will. There's somebody pointing out your brain needs 120 grams of carbohydrates when they actually mean glucose, and that's true. But we have a very robust capacity to produce glucose, independent that yes, you can do like gluconeogenesis. We also know that lactate reshuttling. We also know that we can convert to more higher use of fat for the same cells. And so, because there's people who say, well, if you chronically don't have carbohydrates, you'll be stressed out and there'll be high cortisol levels. That's complete nonsense. We see that in temporary studies. Longer term studies don't show that.
Mhm.
And we know that like ketogenesis is protective for that. So I mean, there's this whole argument about, oh, you're going to be stressed out and high cortisol if you don't eat carbs all the time is garbage once you're adapted. And we see the same thing with the athletic literature.
Mhm.
You need carbs to perform. Again, also complete nonsense. And let me give you a caveat there. I think if you're running marathons and you're doing prolonged, high intensity, long endurance workout, then carbohydrates become beneficial. But for 99.9% of all athletes on planet Earth, they aren't necessary. I mean, they're optional. You may prefer them. They may work well for you, but they're not necessary. And you can certainly
Mhm.
uh, break world records without carbs. There's a guy in the Olympics, got Olympic 400,
Mhm.
400 hurdler,
Yeah.
got the American record for the American indoor hurdles. He's basically carnivore, and several others. I think guys on the Olympic wrestling team. So there's guys that do it. Now they're not common. There's your cat there.
We have the killer cat
Yeah, I
here.
see that. I see that. So, but the question about fat is, like I said, the people that tend to do better on higher fat in general, and again, there's exceptions. Women tend to maybe require a slightly more fat than men do, just because women have more body fat than men, and so it makes
Mhm.
more sense in that regard. People suffering with central nervous system issues, degenerative diseases, multiple sclerosis, maybe early dementia, Parkinson's disease, ALS,
Mhm.
MS, uh, mental health disorders, depression, anxiety. They
Mhm.
tend to do better in a more ketogenic style of carnivore, which tends to be higher fat. Whereas other people, maybe diabetics, maybe some, depending on, weight loss, people might do better with using a little bit, less fat, more protein to a point. Some of the diabetics have a protein threshold before they start, depending how sick they are and how you know broken their insulin glucagon relationships are. They might not do so well on higher protein. But there are, like I said, there are different use cases for the different versions of this, and I think that's why people have different experiences. And somebody, because you'll say, well, I did this and it worked great for me, and the other person does the same thing and they said it was then terrible for me. Just like people will say, I do better on a higher carb diet. Sure, go ahead. If it works for you, go for it. No one's telling you not to. But you can't say that because it works good for me means everybody else must do it. I don't say that. I'm not the guy here telling you that carnivore is a diet for all humans and it's the ultimate diet and where humans are carnivores, and that's not me. I mean, what I will say is, and I've seen that in clinical practice, and that's what we do at Rivero every day. We use carnivore diets and other diets. It's not the only diet we use, but we see people getting healthy with that. So there's no denying that
Mhm.
that occurs.
Mhm.
And the question becomes, long term, short term. No one. There's very few people that are talking about like medications. As physicians, we'll put somebody on medicine for the rest of their life and not think twice about it. But oh my gosh, there's a diet, and we don't have long term data on a lot of these new drugs. We have some data, but we don't have this 50-year data like everybody's talking about. And it's like, so I tell people, hey, as long as you're healthy, keep doing what's working, and I think that's a
Yeah.
reasonable
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah. So one of the things that has become popular are the wearables, the CGMs. Is that something you guys use in Rivero? And is that like, what are your thoughts on that? And especially for somebody who's dealing with, high blood sugars, obesity, things like that,
Mhm.
even food addiction. Have you
Yeah, I mean,
seen,
they
uh
they have they have use case scenarios. Obviously, the like a CGM, for instance, its best use case scenario is obviously diabetes. I mean, we know we have data
Mhm.
on diabetics getting better with CGM. Not always. I mean, data does not necessarily drive change. Like I said, yeah, it's nice to know, but if you don't actually change, what you're doing, then that data is useless, right? I mean, it's like the data is supposed to drive change, and a lot of people, it's like, When CGMs were first being talked about 5 or 6 years ago, and one of my criticisms was
Mhm.
that was like, people are gonna get this data, and what are they gonna do? So they're gonna buy junk food that allows their CGM to look better, right? I mean, they're still gonna, they're trying to hack the number. They're trying to a lot. Ooh, I can eat this keto treat because it's full of sucralose and not sugar, and it doesn't make my blood glucose. But it's still a cookie. It's still kind of crappy food. And so we have to realize that people that only chase biomarkers to look good on paper may not actually be getting
Mhm.
healthier.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, weight loss data, the data on weight loss patients shows that CGMs can be helpful for them, versus others. The concern that a lot of the critics will say is, giving a non-diabetic a CGM will cause them to develop an eating disorder because they'll eat some blueberries and their blood glucose will spike, and then they'll be afraid to eat blueberries, and that's wrong and bad. And the reality is that doesn't really happen. We don't have data
Maybe
that
it
it's
depends
actually
on the
happening.
personality.
Well, and some people, it becomes a source of anxiety because then their whole life is tied around alarms and checking. Oh my God! And it's so.
Mhm.
Again, I always default back to my sort of belief and my philosophy that health is about how you look, how you perform, how you feel. And if my blood glucose is coming up to this moment, does it mean I'm not healthy now? I don't
Mm.
know that we know. There's data that shows glycemic variability is associated with negative outcomes, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I think there's better levers to pull, and
Mhm.
this is why I'm such a and I talk about more of this in my next book. I talk more about the actual health side of it, not just what
Mhm.
what this marker might be doing. I think health is more important than that.
Mhm. So numbers like BMI seems to be a big number, they use that even
Yeah.
for insurance, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you think is like, what are your thoughts about that as a
Well,
met
the BMI, and a lot of people criticize it because, like, for instance, I'm technically obese by BMI. I'm right at BMI 30 because I'm 250 some
Yeah,
pounds, and at
yeah.
6'5", that puts me right at BMI 30. I'm not obese because I'm pretty lean and I've got a
No.
lot of muscle on me, but I'm not the typical person.
Yeah.
Most people that have high BMIs are overweight. There's no doubt
Mhm.
about that. That works for about 95% of the population.
Mhm.
There is that 5% exception, but it's a screening tool like anything else, and there's better ones. I think a waist to height ratio is a more appropriate measurement, but it requires,
Waist
yeah,
to height? Okay.
waist to height. Yeah, you take your height and your
Oh,
waist,
so you got
and you
the
yeah. Yeah, so if you got a big belly and you're short,
mm.
you got real problems, and so that's a you either can get taller, which is hard to do when you're after a certain age, and then
So if you look like the pregnant emoji,
yeah, yeah,
you
that's
got
not good. That's
you got
not good.
issues,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
I have a question going back to fat. So,
Mhm.
you know, some people are just fat averse, whether it's because of conditioning or texture or
Right.
whatever it is. What have you seen to be an effective way to increase fat intake for people, who could benefit from it? Like you were talking about people with, um, neurological issues,
Mhm.
especially.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's
any
kind of it's
what
funny
what
because my son, my wife, was a vegetarian for a while, and she's still pretty fat averse, even though she's nearly carnivore now, and she eats, but I'll cook her a ribeye steak, and she's cutting all the fat off of that, and I'm
is
just
that
like,
kind of a conditioning thing?
well, yeah, I think she's been conditioned to that, and some
Yeah,
people just don't like the texture of fat, and I get
yeah.
that. Um, you know, but I'll talk to my son. He goes, "Well, I don't like fat," and then I said, "Would you like ice cream?" "Oh yeah, I love ice cream." Well, ice cream's got a lot of fat in it too, right? So it's like you don't like certain types of fat. So then it's kind of like, well, how do you get a fat that's so like, if you can afford it, then you buy steaks that are well marbled. You get the well marbled
Mhm,
stuff, and you're putting just as much fat in there, but it's all because it's mixed in with the protein. You can't notice it, so you can
mhm,
up the fat content that way. And there's, people are when they say they don't like fat, it means they don't like a certain type of fat, and so you can certainly
mm,
play with that. And again, obviously, a lot of people like butter, and a lot of people like dairy fats, and a lot of people like marbled steaks versus
yeah,
steaks that have discrete fat deposits in there. So there's ways to up that without and deal with that texture because it's mostly a textural thing. It's not
mhm,
because fat is good. This is what the French cooking is
yeah,
all based on. Fat is
yeah,
flavor. The cream
yeah,
sauces and all
for
the
sure,
huge amounts of butter and stuff they utilize. So
yeah.
so I don't
I
think most people don't like fat. I think it's just the texture.
Yeah, they maybe haven't had the right experience. I cook my dad is can be fat averse, and I think it's partly conditioning for all those years of telling him to be fat free.
Yep.
And, he's 88, and I cook him eggs every morning. I cook his eggs in his fried eggs. I cook them in beef tallow and butter, and it ends up kind of swimming in it, and then I give him sausage, like beef sausage, and he but if I add extra but I pre-butter the bread, like, he's got, like, spelt bread that he eats, so he's really low carb,
Mhm.
but if I add extra butter to his bread, that's where he draws the line, but as long as the food is kind of swimming in the fat,
Yeah.
he'll use the bread because he's a New Englander, so he uses that bread to sop up the
Right. Yeah.
extra, so it's like a little reverse Uno card that I throw in there every day. Um, so it works pretty well. But, he's the kind of person that'll, you'll like I want things to go with my butter. Like I just love butter. But he's the kind of person if you start adding butter, he'll be like, "That's enough. Don't do that." And I'm like, "I don't even know you. Who are you?" So it's just kind of funny. So yeah, fat is good. And then of course 80/20 ground beef. A lot of people have gotten conditioned to getting ground beef that is low fat, where it's sort of 96.4%, things like that.
Mhm.
And then you cook it and it's all dried up, and then people think they don't like ground beef. Well, if you start getting 80/20 ground beef and you make your burger patties with that, I think you'll have a much better experience, and then you can just put little pats of butter on your burger patties, and that's a nice little meal. So that's something to think about, but I guess it's just a mindset thing too for some people, but,
Well,
you
and, to be fair, there are people that don't tolerate a lot of fat in their diet. I mean, they'll have digestive issues. I mean, there are
Mhm,
people that have, gallbladder issues, or they have
mhm,
inadequate pancreatic sufficiency with lipase and stuff like that. So some people struggle to tolerate fat. Generally, it's improvable for most people with time if you kind of slowly
mhm,
ramp things up. And again, I'm not here to say that everybody needs to be on a ketogenic style diet or even a carnivore diet for that matter.
mhm.
But I do think that if you're going to reduce your carbs, you need some energy, unless you're really obese, and then you might be able to use a lot of your own. But at some point,
Mhm.
once you get to a normal body weight, you need energy. Otherwise, you just sit around all day.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's good to have that freedom, and, one thing I'm seeing in the chat here is really it's about eating real food, right? Whole food, and I think if most people were to move in that direction, we would see drastic changes in this country, and around the world, and I saw a post on social media.
Well, let,
Go
let me
ahead.
just let me just comment on that,
Yeah.
because and I don't disagree with you. I think we could go to real food, but the problem is when you paint real food as kale, kale and quinoa salad or something like that.
Yeah.
The problem with that is it's inherently not very satisfying or satiating. So when you
Okay.
tell people, and we've beaten people over the head, well, if you're just eating healthy greens and beans and
Mm,
lentils and stuff like that, and you avoid fat, that's the right thing. And it's true that many of those people would improve their health if they're eating, the standard American junk food diet. But that's really hard to sustain for people. You see all these women
okay.
that, they'll go out to eat, and they'll just, what do they get? A salad, maybe a little thin strip of chicken. They put the dressing on the side. They did it for years. And then they come home and they're starving. So they eat a box of chocolate, or a pint of
Right,
ice cream, because they
right.
can't maintain that. And so I think that, telling people to eat whole foods is in
Mm,
part correct, but I think the food has to provide some level of satiety to it. And I think this is where
mm,
we get into, well, what is
okay.
actually going to make me feel full? I could get bloated by eating a pound of spinach, but
Mhm.
am I actually full? Is that going to slake my appetite? And I think the answer for most people is no, it's not.
So very sad. That's really good. That's a great observation, and, I was one of those people that tried to eat salads and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. Salad is exhausting, and let's just be real. So, making a salad is so time consuming. You have so many ingredients and you have to prepare them all, and then there's all this food guilt that comes with salad, not because you're not eating the right thing, but because there's always something that's gonna spoil. Like, you go and you get all these healthy foods, and then you bring them home and you just can't get to them all. And so you find dead lettuce or dead broccoli or something in the crisper drawer. I mean, it's happened to all of us.
Well, eating a organic plant-based diet for many people, maybe not all, but many people ends up in a lot of waste because, yeah, as you're
Yeah.
right, I cannot tell you how many, fresh fruit, containers of strawberries got moldy I threw out, berries,
Yeah.
salads that got wilted. And, that's a lot of money, but not only that is when you consume those things, you don't even digest most of it. Most of that stuff
Right.
ends up in your toilet. So you're basically nourishing your toilet as much as you're nourishing yourself. And so that becomes a waste of money. And yeah, I mean, when I used to eat, when I was keto, 12,
Yeah.
13 years ago before I started carnivore, I remember listening to Mark Sisson. He's talking about this eat a big ass salad. He had the bowl of salad the size of your head. And I would
Yes,
do that. And
yes,
I would
that
eat
was
these,
my first exposure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I would eat these giant bowls of spinach. I'd get a pound of spinach, one of those bags, and I throw it in there, and I throw some nuts on there, some cranberries, and some
Same.
eggs, and some bacon, and some olive oil, and
Yeah.
balsamic vinegar,
So
and
much
I'd eat that
time. It takes
salad.
so much time.
Well, yeah, and I'd eat it, and I remember, um, I was like, the only thing I like in here are the toppings. I don't really like the lettuce at all or the spinach. And so I
Yeah.
remember a few times I literally sat down and ate an entire pound bag of spinach, undressed, alone by itself. And I was thinking, this is the most, if I've got to do this to be healthy, I would never be able to do this. And it was just miserable. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think anyone likes plain spinach by itself without smothered in fat or some kind of sauce or sugar or some kind of, product on there. You just don't. And so it's like these things are just, I don't think anybody would voluntarily eat them unless they were starving, quite honestly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and then, you see these videos of people doing food prep, and, I mean, like I said, it's exhausting. And one thing about carnivore is it's simple. I mean, you have it simplifies shopping, it simplifies food preparation, it can be done very affordably. You can buy 80/20 ground beef, and you can come up with different ways to prepare it. I think one of the easiest things is burger patties, and I like to make mine really thin, and they're so easy to cook, and if you make them thin and freeze them, they're easy to thaw. It's a quick meal, even if you're in a hurry. So, that's something that I've noticed, and of course, eggs. Eggs are easy. So, I think people complicate it, and I think just like with keto, one of the things you see is people kinda get crazy with it, and they come up with all these keto substitutions for things that they want. Keto bread, keto cheesecake, keto cookies, keto, and then the next thing you know, you're going down that keto junk food rabbit hole.
Yeah, Cheeto is what a lot of people call it. They go
Keto.
on the Cheeto diet, it's just like, they're just substituting junk food, and it ends up to
Yeah.
becoming a chemical bunch of garbage for the most part. I mean, there's some incredibly creative people out there that have come up with all these recipes, and I don't have any recipes. I mean, I literally just, you know,
Yeah.
I don't really spend any time at all. I mean, I had a picanha for lunch today, or breakfast, lunch,
Mhm.
whatever. It's 2.5 pounds. It's probably all the food I'm gonna eat today, probably. I might have something small beyond that, but
Yeah. Yeah,
but
it's a
that's
lot
it.
simpler.
It was salt. It was salt and fire. Those are the only
Mhm.
ingredients I needed plus the meat. So it can be very simple,
Yeah, there's a
for sure.
comment on here. This is like we were talking about. Jen on YouTube says, "I made 16 jars of bone broth and jarred the fat, saved the fat. Between that and meat, I'm good for the month." It really is that simple, I think. So, definitely definitely a simple thing, especially if you're kind of a plain eater and you don't really need all that adventure. But if you do need more adventure and you don't have a lot of weight to lose, you can make some really good sauces with fats, like the French style of sauces, that are good. So, let's take a quick break. We'll talk a little bit about Rivero, and, I'm gonna mute for just a second.
Okay, well, I'll talk about referral. So, guys, hey, if you guys are suffering with chronic disease, and you want help and you need help because some people, it does need more help. We provide help every single day for our folks. We have doctors that get carnivore ketogenic style diets. We've got a team of health coaches. I talk to all the patients, a couple times a week. So the success is great. I mean, we've been having wonderful success with that. It's something that, if you or someone you love needs to get healthier and needs help because they've been trying and failing year after year, this is a way to facilitate that. I mean, the alternative is just stay on the drugs, stay on the pills, and be forever dependent upon the healthcare system. And I think as a physician, that's not what our job is to do. Our job is to heal people, not to keep people chronically, addicted and medicated. So there you go. Referral.com. Check it out. It's talk to one of our enrollment advisors. They can give you all the details and you can
Awesome.
see if it works for you.
Yeah, and so that is right there, and you're available in all 50 states, right?
Yes.
The voice thing is coming back. Might need
Uh-oh.
you to take over. So, we want to talk about one of our other sponsors, really quickly. So, Shawn has met these guys. We have our friends out in Oklahoma at griddownchowdown.com. This is a, freeze-dried beef. They also make jerky, but this particular product is freeze-dried ground beef. It's super simple. All you do is add water. It's American-grown, grass-fed, grass-finished. You're supporting American farmers and ranchers when you buy from them. Go to their website and use promo code Mary Grace. That's griddownchowdown.com. Promo code Mary Grace. You do get a discount on your first order. And the best way to buy is the subscribe and save. They are a boutique-run company, so that means that you're not gonna get, like, an overnight turnaround that you would with a big box retailer, but it's worth it because it's made with love right here in the heartland of America by people who love what they do. And so griddownchowdown.com and, go for it. Stock up. Use it for prepping or just for weekly or daily cooking, however you wanna use it. People love it. We get great reports, and we encourage you to support that American-run business. We also have, for people who want supplements, we encourage you to go to the source of the manufacturers, and we have partnered with really, high quality, well-known manufacturers so that you can take the guesswork out of what you're buying, and that is on the Mary Grace Essentials store. You go to maryrgracewellness.gethealthy.store, or you can simply pop over to my website, marygracemedia.com, and find the link from there as well. Again, there's a subscribe and save option. You save on your first order and you get free shipping. Fantastic way to get your supplements and know that you are getting from the actual manufacturers because we work with them directly and we've curated what is in the store there. And if there's anything you're looking for in particular that you're not finding in the store, send me an email, info@marygracemedia.com. It's likely that we'll be able to add it to the storefront. We have thousands of SKUs that we don't even have pushed into the storefront, but we can add it if we have it. So just wanted to let people know that. And also, Dr. Baker, you do have another book coming out, but let's remind people that you wrote The Carnivore Diet, and people can pick that up. So if you're new to this and you're wanting to know more about how to make that transition and the benefits and how it could help you, check that out. Go over to the link here and you can order directly and get his book. You can get it on digital, print, however you want, and it's right there for you to check out. Okay, so we're back, and let me get this out of the way. We might have some questions here.
Yeah, let me
Let's
just
see.
I
Yeah.
see a little commentary going back and forth between
Okay.
the sugar folks and talking about the Walter Kempner diet. This is a diet that a German
Oh,
physician did back in the, I think, 1930s, 1940s, and he put people on a very low fat, high carbohydrate diet that was also low in protein, mostly rice and sugar, and people lost weight and their diabetes got better. And that's sort of something we're seeing, modernly with this so-called FGF21, fibroblastic growth factor 21. And so we know that if you restrict energy or you restrict protein, then you will see a loss of weight. And what happens is the body, because when we eat, our body is expecting to get a certain amount of protein, a certain amount of energy. And if those things are missing, either protein missing in something like a sugar-based diet or energy, like in a protein-sparing modified fast, people will lose weight. And it's because the body thinks it's starving. That doesn't work for all people. That's the other thing that has to be clear. Not everybody displays FGF21, and it's not a long-term thing you can do. You can't be on low fat, low protein, very low fat for an extremely long time, without sacrificing muscle, without sacrificing other things. We know that like extremely low fat diets over time have been associated with significant problems. So there are problems with that. I think that the fact that people lose weight and improve temporarily is not surprising. There's something called kwashiorkor, which in the most extreme version, this is what we see these third world kids with the big swollen bellies, where they go under what's protein malnutrition, where they actually have adequate calories. They're on a high carb diet. Typically, they're on like a grain based diet because that's all they can get, and yet they're starving because they have no protein. So they have the skinny limbs, the big swollen bellies, and because kids have such a high demand for energy and turnover and protein, that they develop sickness. Now, adults don't do that. And the reality is no one lives in a society where you can't access protein. So these people on a sugar diet are never really going to be protein malnourished because they're always adding the protein back in later. But I mean, the concept is not unheard of. But again, is that the most sustainable and right answer for everyone to do that? I don't think it is. I think there's, we see this sugar diet thing that kind of had a little peak, and now it seems to be, it's kind of fading a little bit, and I suspect, it'll do like that. Whereas, and carnivore is still growing. I mean, we'll see when it reaches its peak and when it turns around. But it's still, to my experience, we still see more and more people talking about it. And the fact that, the Secretary of Health, the HHS secretary is saying he's on a carnivore diet, and the fact that the dietary guidelines have flipped around and put meat at the very first food on there is testament to the amount of realization that people are that meat is a health food. And I think we're certainly seeing that. And then we can argue about fat and carbs all day. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, no one's going to agree. It's going to be a lot of people just disagreeing, and that's fine. But as long as people are getting healthy, that's all I care about. Is just like, hey, let's do something to get you healthy. And if you want to choose this route and it works for you, good for you. I'm here to talk about carnivore and that type of stuff because that's what I have expertise in. I don't have expertise in the sugar diet. And so I'll do where I'm good at. And that's where that goes.
Yeah. So thank you for clearing that up, Dr. Baker. I guess we're starting the Q&A now.
Okay.
So are we okay
Sure,
with
let's
that?
ask questions.
Was there anything else you wanted to cover before we go into Q&A?
No, that's fine. Yeah, because I've actually got to run pretty soon here. So let's knock out some Q&A stuff.
So I have a question that was texted to me by my cousin. So she and her husband have been on carnivore, really seen good results, reversal in a lot of health issues, but she really struggles with cortisol. And so and she's, postmenopause, works from home, wants to have a breakthrough, but the cortisol kind of like that high alert mode. She just said, "I can't get out of that." Do you have any recommendations for
Well,
somebody?
I mean, again, when people say I'm my cortisol, I don't know how you know that. I mean, like you might have one blood test that's just elevated cortisol. Low cortisol is actually a problem too. I mean, we know that there's a certain amount is variable, so it's hard to diagnose. It's a cortisol issue. Yeah. However, I mean, I think there's, there's obviously things that are stressful to us and things that are problematic. So, I mean, I think you got to work holistically. Obviously, we're making sure we're getting good sleep. We have good sleep hygiene, and that can be impacted by when we eat and how much we eat and those types of things. We want to make sure we stay active throughout the day so that we're not, dealing with energy ups and downs, and our food is appropriate for that. I mean, there's obviously stress mitigation techniques. I mean, I think exercise is a wonderful one. I think everybody should do it. But I mean, there's, you people talking about different type of breathing strategies, whether it's box breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, or there's different, 7-2 or 4-4-4 breathing or whatever it might be. Those things can be helpful over time. And again, improving your body composition. I don't know your cousin, but if your cousin is 20-30 pounds overweight, that would go a long way to improving overall health. I mean, I think that to me, these are the big.
So like resistance training, movement, things like that.
Movement. I mean, the way I structure what I think physical activity should look at, the base of that is just movement. If you're sedentary, that's the biggest lever. If you can go from sedentary to non-sedentary, that's going to get you 80% of your health gains from so-called activity and exercise. From there, then the next step is to get stronger. Then I think strength training you put on top of that. You get a baseline level of just reasonable strength. You should be probably for your age, you should be in the top 25%. And that's not hard to do, because the top 25% is quite honestly a very easy metric to hit, because everybody's so abysmally weak. So you get there, and then from there you start working on cardiovascular conditioning, and that could be HIIT training. It could be long, steady, zone 2 aerobic type stuff. And then the final thing is just what I call the athleticism component, of the ability to run and sprint and jump and change direction, and be like an athlete, be like you were when you were in your 20s, and if you can demonstrate those things, I think you've reached this pinnacle for quality of life. And I think that's, to me, probably the greatest indicator of health. Every old person is old, fat, and weak, or slow, fat, and weak. I mean, every old person, they get slow, they get fat, they get weak. And so if you're not slow, fat, and weak, instead you're strong, fast, and lean, you're probably not as old, and you're probably going to live longer. But I mean, again, I'm not a longevity guy. I sort of criticize people for that, but certainly your quality of life is going to be better.
Thank you. Okay, so Delia had a question about sous vide, but I didn't see her question. Did you see it?
I saw some comments from Delia about, Rivero helping her kick butt, which is good.
Yeah, I thought she had a question about sous vide, but if we miss it, I'll ask her. Because I know her, so she can always text me. But
okay.
I know she told me earlier that she had a question. So, okay, Delia, we can't see your question, and you said you had to sign off. All right. So somebody had a question about, hold on.
A lot of comments in there.
Yeah, about nitrogen isotope. Okay. Were the results of nitrogen isotope tests a shock to the scientific community when they learned that the gatherer in the hunter-gatherer was basically unwarranted?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at like radioisotope data, whether it's and they've looked at different isotopes, whether it's nitrogen, carbon, and a few other, I think they've used strontium and some other ones for assessing that, and they're able to sort of estimate the trophic level of the animal. They can look at how the nitrogen, the isotopes accumulate, and they can say, well, this, based on this, and we have modern examples to compare it to, this creature probably consumed X amount of nitrogen coming from these sources. And so what it tends to show is that for a lot of time, a lot of human beings were pretty carnivorous. And I think there's a great paper written by Mickey Bendor, Rafi Sartoldi, and Rana Barkey. I think in 2022 it came out. It's called, I think it's called the humic trophic level in the Pleistocene or something like that. And it goes through about 25 converging lines of science that say up until about roughly 80,000 years ago, maybe 120 to 80,000 years ago, that humans were primarily carnivorous. And then due to some of the pressure that occurred, because, as human population grew into the millions and millions, and the megafaunal population became to dwindle, because, when you're hunting, like for instance, elephants, they have pregnancy. They don't get pregnant very often. I think their pregnancy cycle is once every few years. And if you and they preferentially kill the babies, because the babies are easier to kill. So if you kill a few babies, then it doesn't take long to wipe that population out, because the reproduction rates are so low. We see that, with human populations, when our replacement rate falls below, what is it, 1.9 or 2, then we start losing population. So the elephants are even worse, if they're not, because they
have a longer gestation.
They have such a long gestation and a long a long inter pregnancy time. So, so then at 80,000 years ago, we start running out of megafauna animals. And so now we go to the next thing on the chain, which would be these faster animals, these antelopes. And the difference in food composition on an antelope versus an elephant is elephants are very fatty. Antelopes tend to be much leaner. So now we're eating lean meat instead of fatty meat. And so now, to supplement our energy, we have to start looking for more, gathering roots and berries. And then eventually, at 12,000 years ago, we started to, the first, evidence of industrial farming starts to occur. And that was associated with lack of decrease in brain size. Human brain started shrinking around 120,000 years ago, supposedly based on endocranial sizes and some of the skulls they dig up. Now, again, that's all speculative, because anthropology at best is digging up a few rare bones. They'll find like a
Yeah.
tooth. They'll find like one tooth and a part of a jaw and say, "This is what we think this guy looked like." And you're like, "How the hell did you figure that out?" But
I know, there's a lot of imagination at play
yeah.
here, I think.
So it's
I
but that's some of the
Yeah.
thought behind that. If
I
you want
found
to.
the sous vide question, by the way.
Oh, you did. What
So,
was it?
yeah, so d does Doctor Baker sous vide all his steaks? If so, how does he prevent the fat from turning to gristle? I think maybe she means if not. How do you so
Oh
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah. I sous vide a lot of my steaks. Yeah, probably the
Okay,
majority of
so
them.
can you explain that to our listeners?
Well, I mean, sous vide is a French term. Sous vide means, vide means empty so it's technically cooking under, sous is under, so cooking under vacuum. So basically you vacuum seal something. You can do it in a Ziploc bag, or it's, in the bag it comes with, or you can buy silicone bags if you don't like, a little bit of plastic there. And then you just
Mhm,
basically put it in a water bath, and the water bath will bring it to the temperature. So it's cooked completely evenly throughout to whatever temperature you want it to be. So if you like your steaks medium rare, like I do, I usually cook it to 120 degrees in the sous vide, and then I'll sear it and it'll raise temperature a little bit. And then it ends up being about 130. And so a nice,
mhm.
edge to edge pink with a little sear on that. And so it's super easy to do. It's super reliable, takes all the guesswork. You can turn really tough cuts of meat um, into,
Mm,
we all know that if you've got a tough cut of meat, what are you going to do? You're going to slow cook it, right? You're going to braise it. You're going to
mhm.
crock pot it. You're going to put it
Yeah,
in pressure
yeah.
cooker or whatever. And so sous vide, you can do the same thing. And I've had like things like shank, or like oxtail type stuff, which is really tough.
Mm,
Um, 24, 36 hours just sitting there and slowly cooking, breaking down all
right.
that connective
Yeah,
so it eats nice.
yeah.
Same thing like a brisket. If you try to cook
Mhm.
a brisket in an hour, good luck with that. You're going to be chewing through, it's like leather, but
Oh,
the typical way you do a brisket, you smoke it on a smoker for 12,
mm.
14, 16 hours, and then it's just fall apart tender and
Right.
delicious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's yeah, brisket is good. And if you, so sous vide too so it's kind of like, you're doing a reverse sear, but you're using the sous vide to pre-cook instead of
Right,
doing a
right.
slow cook, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I know you can cook your steaks, at a very low temperature to get a really consistent internal temperature, and then you bring it out and sear it. A lot of people will do that. But that's another technique where you can get it more even temperature.
Yeah, I mean, just have a little temperature probe. That's a super.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if you're gonna cook a lot of meat, you get a little temperature probe. It's worth the
yeah.
fifty
Do you
bucks or
use the
30 bucks,
infrared?
whatever.
Have you ever used the infrared
The infrared what?
temperature, thermometer, meat thermometer?
No, I haven't. I've got like a ThermoWorks pen where it's just an
Mhm.
instant reading. I think I had a meter probe, which never worked. It never worked for me for some reason. I don't know. But
Okay.
yeah, I've
Um,
got my Traeger grill has a built-in probe that I stick in there.
now
It's you know,
I have one question though about the temperature. So, like, you know that you want your temperature to be 130, right? So, at what point do you take it out of the sous vide to allow for continued
Yeah,
cooking,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
right?
it depends how thick the steak is. The
Just
thicker the steak, the
take the
closer you
brain.
can bring it to the final temperature. So
Okay.
let's just say I want to eat it at 130, you
Yeah.
know? So if I've got a thin piece of steak, I'm gonna cook it really, really I might cook it at 112. If I've got a really thick hunk of meat, I might cook it at 125, because I know that
Mm,
sear that I'm gonna put on the end is gonna impart some additional temperature cook. So, I mean, it just depends on the size of the
okay.
meat. So the smaller the steak, the lower I cook it, the bigger the steak, the higher I cook it.
Got
And
it.
then the
Okay.
searing, because I do the searing very rapidly, and again, it depends how fast you can sear things. Because
Mhm.
I've got this grill that goes to 1500 degrees, I can sear, very quickly, a minute,
You're not
one
messing
side,
around
so it's seared really
like
quickly, yeah.
Richard Pryor, just um you have to be a certain age to get that joke. Okay, so, okay, let's see if we have any more questions. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Is the sous vide it's a special you have a machine for that, or is it a special appliance, or are you just vacuum sealing and putting it in a water.
Yeah, I mean, they make little sous vide wands is what I call them, and they're just like it's just like a little tube that's got you just drop it in a pot or container, and you just clip it to the side and type in your temperature, and it just,
Oh, okay.
kinda circulates the water and heats it while it's doing it, so it's a
Oh,
little
so you use
you
whatever
can
pot you have.
yeah, use whatever, but I use just a big, little Tupperware, like a big it's like a plastic container that I just fill up with
Mhm.
water and I throw the thing in there, and I've been using that for years. Yeah, but anything that'll hold water, you can do it in. It's gotta be a certain depth, it's gotta be, half a foot, at least 6 inches deep and big enough to get your steaks in there, and that's all you need. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. See if you can find another question. I have to cough, sorry.
I saw a question about what was the question here? It was about stroke patients. Depending on specific deficits, what are the general improvements that can be achieved on a carnivore diet? Well, again, I can't say that we've got study data on stroke patients. I will say that I, I certainly have met a number of stroke patients over the years that have seen insignificant improvement by going carnivore. Now, most of your benefits with a stroke in general are going to occur within the first year. If you see somebody that has a stroke, you can anticipate that they're going to, most of the possible achievement will be within the first year. So if you're beyond that, it's hard to say you're going to get much more. Now, again, if you are ongoing and insulting your body with poison food, whatever you want to call that, and carnivore removes that, you might get additional recovery on that. So I think it's, really anything. I mean, it's, I think it's whether it's, facial paralysis or hemiparesis of the body, or maybe you've got some speech or cognitive deficit from stroke. I mean, I think those things can be mitigated and improved through diet. I mean, I think that's not an outrageous thing to do. And so I think, for if I was going to try it, I'd tell people, hey, do it for 3 months, do it fairly strictly.
Mhm.
Probably with regard to stroke or any central nervous system thing, I think a more ketogenic style is going to be more beneficial. So, I mean, I would veer towards a more higher fat approach in that situation,
Mhm.
and ramp it up as tolerated. And that's how I'd approach it, and just see what it nets you, because I can't, I would point you to, like, say, for instance, Matthew Phillips. He's a neurologist that's been practicing ketogenic carnivore diets on all kinds of brain injury, central nervous system things. So he probably has a little bit more additional insight into that. Using that specifically. So Matthew Phillips, he's a neurologist. He's out in New Zealand, but he's online and he talks quite a bit. And so he's probably got a lot of insight here.
Okay. Um, let's see. Type 1 diabetic. Did you answer that question?
No, I didn't see
Okay,
it.
50 female, type 1 diabetic. How many carbs would a person need? I'm guessing you would have to wean yourself off of carbs while starting carnivore.
Well,
So
as a type 1, and we have a lot of type 1 diabetics that go carnivore, and what generally happens to them is they see a decreased requirement for insulin, both basal and bolus, because most people are on some sort of basal bolus, whether on a pump or injections.
Mhm.
You know, uh, they see a reduction in that, a gradual reduction in that. Some people get to where they don't even need to take anything but a little bit of basal. I mean, depending on how much they're eating. I mean,
Mhm.
it can go very low. And we do know that, for instance, there are pretty good studies out there showing that the higher your insulin use as a type 1 diabetic, like, say you're using, like, it's usually like in units per kilogram. So if you use less than 0.5 units per kilogram, that's considered, you're less likely to get cancer. If you use more than 0.8 units per kilogram. So let's say, as a female, you weigh 50 kilograms. So if you're using more than 40 units a day, your cancer risk is higher. If you're using under 25 units a day, your cancer is a lot lower. So carnivore can help with that. I see a lot of people where they start to wean down their required insulin. Their blood glucose tends to be more stable. They actually get less hypos, because they're not, because usually the hypo is usually not enough food. It's usually an insulin overdose. So you overshoot, you overcorrect, and then
Mhm.
you get this big crash into the 50s and 40s, and you feel awful, and you got to take a bunch of sugar to, and sometimes you take too much and it goes back up again. And it's just kind of like this roller coaster that type 1s go on. And then the other thing, and a really exciting thing for me, is I've seen a number of type 1s actually reverse, the end organ damage that's occurring with diabetics. So we see people with, for instance, say diabetic retinopathy, where, you have the eye exam you get every year
Mhm.
as a type 1, you're supposed to, that will often disappear. Same thing
Yeah.
with kidney function, same thing with vascular disease. So it's a good way to do it. Again, you can certainly wean yourself. I mean, that makes sense. And again, this would be a situation where you might want some sort of knowledgeable physician oversight to help you with that, because yeah, most type 1 diabetics are pretty comfortable with dosing themselves after a period of time, and they know, and they're pretty good at it. And so it's, but
Mhm.
the reality is, you're going to have to lower your insulin, most likely, depending on what you're eating previously, particularly if uh if you're wanting to do this.
And have you guys worked you at Rivero, you work with type 1?
We work with diabetics, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's rivero.com. Another question about, alkaline versus acid foods. How do they affect health? Any thoughts?
I think it's nonsense. I mean,
I knew
You
had a
know,
feeling.
I mean, it has minimal impact. It's
Yeah.
very minimal. I mean, the reality is, like, for instance, the intracellular, um, pH is not gonna change much. The blood pH is not gonna change much. I mean, you can and just by breathing, you change your pH. Just your kidneys do a good job with that. We have a built-in bicarbonate system. There's some thought that, if you're eating a lot of foods that have amino acids which contain sulfur in them, and these things are things like methionine and cysteine in particular, that you'll excrete a little bit of hydrosulfuric acid, and that will slightly raise your urine pH, or decrease your urine pH rather, because it's more acidic. But honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I know there's a guy named James Dinicol-Antonio's out there screaming about, "Oh, you need to take bicarbonate if you're eating carnivore and all that stuff." And again, that's all a bunch of just histrionic, fear-mongering stuff that doesn't really seem to add up for any real significance. I've not seen any evidence, in carnivores that acid is causing some major issues for them. It just doesn't seem to play out.
Okay, we have a question that is triggered by, somebody looking at AI, so I know you're gonna have an opinion on this. Do you hear anyone having higher SHBG on carnivore? According to AI, that could be an issue, or is that BS?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it can go any direction. The question is, like, some people's testosterone goes up on carnivore, some people it goes down, some people it doesn't make a difference. Same thing with cholesterol. The biomarkers are not what we care about at the end of the day. I certainly don't care about that. I don't know what my sex hormone binding globulin is. I have no idea what it is right now. It could be 10, it could be
I didn't
1,000.
even know what
I don't
that
know.
was.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of a hormone panel, but I mean, honestly, I don't know what any of my biomarkers are right this second, and neither do you, unless you're sitting there with a continuous sex
Mhm.
hormone binding globulin calculator, a monitor on. So
Yeah,
these things fluctuate all the time, and so one lab, who knows, don't really care so much about it. What we care about, when it comes to, say, sex hormones, or what are the sex hormones doing? What are they promoting? For instance, for testosterone, what does testosterone do for a male? It helps with libido, sexual function, body composition, ability to maintain muscle mass, and then it has,
mhm,
cognitive benefits. And provided those things are working well, the numbers are of secondary importance, quite honestly. So I look at what is, again, how do I feel? How do I function? How do I
yeah,
perform? Or how do I look, rather? And those are the things that we should focus on. And anytime people start, worrying about these numbers, they get lost. They really get lost. I mean, yeah, I mean, in general, healthy people will have, well, healthy people are healthy people. I'm just going to say
mhm,
that. I think it's, if I had no access to labs or MRIs or any of these tests, like we didn't have, uh, you know, 300 years ago, I don't know that a healthy person would look any different. A sick person's still going to look like a sick person, and a healthy person is going to look like a healthy
mhm.
person. And
Yeah,
I know it seems like counterintuitive, because now we live in this time with all this technology and AI and all this stuff that's going to save the world. And, we've had all this technology over the years, and we
yeah.
haven't really, some people argue, well, we're living longer, and that's true. And some of that has to
But
do with
what's
a
the
lot of nice.
quality?
Well,
What's
I
the
mean,
living quality?
the number one factor that has caused human life expectancy has been clean drinking water and sanitation. That trumps
Mhm,
everything else out there. Then some people would argue antibiotics and vaccines. I know there's a lot of controversy around vaccines. And then some people say some of the other modern interventions, like we can help people survive longer if they had a heart attack. And those things are true. But at the same time, I think, we are, as a society with all this technology, we're fatter and we're sicker as a population than ever. And it's,
yeah.
you can say, well, all the old people died back then and never got old enough to get sick. But the problem is we
We have
have
a lot of young people
we
who
have a
are
lot of young people that are sick too. And so
yeah,
that makes it
even
hard
children
to
who
find new
have,
things. Yeah.
they call it diabesity now because it's no longer adult onset. Young children
Well,
have
yeah,
type 2
type
diabetes.
2 is now, it used to be adult onset in childhood, juvenile diabetes, and those have changed long ago, because
Yeah,
we don't.
yeah.
And to be fair, we see a lot of adults getting type 1 now, which is interesting.
Mm. Yeah, very interesting. So we have a comment here I thought it would be good to share. Uncle Charlie on YouTube says, "I was 325 pounds, now 180. A1C was 18, now it's 5. I
Wow,
had fatty
18 is high.
liver." I know, fatty liver, kidney, heart, pancreas didn't work. I was in the hospital 10 days. Doctor said insulin and metformin for life. Boy, was she wrong. So I'm assuming
So I don't know
You
what
made a
Charlie
lot
did,
of
but yeah,
lifestyle changes,
yeah,
Charlie.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe you can tell us what you did, but we're assuming that you left out the part where you did low carb slash carnivore, high fat, and, made some other lifestyle changes, so we're glad
Yeah,
you have
however you got there, good for you,
that road,
and
yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, we unfortunately as physicians, and physicians are generally, given, and there's some ones that are not so good, but I mean, in general, most physicians are good people. They want to do the right thing. They just don't know. They just don't know they just don't know how to do this stuff
Yeah,
because that's
yeah,
not they're trained upon. They're given, it's like going to an auto mechanic to have somebody help you with gardening. It's a totally different thing. We're not
yeah,
skilled in. We're not
yeah,
skillful in. But fortunately, some of us are figuring it out and realize this. And like I said, as a physician, my job is to get people healthier and heal them. And unfortunately, that turned into disease management, which is what modern medical care is. And so, you see all the drugs that come out now, all of them are lifestyle medications. Those are the profitable ones. We want to discover lifestyle things that you know, we want issues that make people's quality of life worse that we can medicate them for the rest of their life for. And so we see all these GLP-1s and GIP and glucagon agonists now, with regard to weight loss. And then, the question was, well, what about all the muscle loss? Well, that doesn't happen. But then at the same time, they're developing drugs to prevent muscle loss at the same time. And it's just like, well, if it's not a problem, why are you developing another drug? Well, yeah, because it is a problem. And so now you're on 2 or 3 drugs and you're on these
good
for the
point.
rest of your life. And, they make a lot of money and you stay medicated. And I don't know if you're getting healthier.
Yeah.
Some people do.
So, you guys could probably figure out my voice is not wanting to keep talking. So I think probably should this is a good time to call it because I know you got things you need to take care of too. We've had a great discussion here. So many good comments. It's always interesting over on the YouTube, that's for sure. So we thank everybody who's participated here and on the other channels. Thank you to our moderators over on Rumble, to Delia. Um, and we will come back. If you missed your question today, we'll come back. We'll, just hold on to it because we'll be back. And we do appreciate everybody here. And please share this. Please get the word out to people that the somebody made a funny comment. Get the word out, share this, send it to people, and tag people that you know. It really could be life changing for somebody to find out that there's some really simple solutions to challenges that they've been told are insurmountable with your health. And if that's helped somebody today, then great. We're happy that we were able to do that. And don't blame my cold on carnivore. Um, it's just that one of those things. So, but we'll be back, and I appreciate everybody here. And Dr. Baker, any last words here that you want to leave us with? Go to Rivero.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just hope you guys find it works for you. And if you need help, we were happy to help you at Rivero. I'd love to see you. Like to meet you in person. Like I said, I get to talk with all the patients at Rivero. And get after it. Life's too short not to be
Yeah.
healthy, and but you can do a lot more when you're healthy. So let's find a way to make
Excellent,
that happen.
excellent. And as always, please go and follow us over at marygracemedia.com. Get on the mailing list, shop our affiliate partners over there. We have more than just the freeze-dried beef, but we do love those guys. So please support them, our sponsors for today's show. And we will see you back here soon. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening wherever you are, warm, cold, whatever. And where I live, no, you can't touch any grass right now. So I'm just going to say, if you're in a warm place, go touch some grass for us. And, say goodbye to Daisy. Come on, let's see her again. She's so cute. Okay, just one more look, so we'll go super viral. That's it. Okay, everybody have a great evening,
Bye, guys.
and, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.